I'm a little late to the announcement. I'm not going to give reasons because right now I want to discuss Irv Gotti and his passing. I didn't know much about him outside of pop culture and seeing clips from a few interviews and things. And I'm going to get into the interviews when we discuss the second point, I think, with Irv. But before I get into Irv Gotti, I want to give sort of a relatable story from my own background that's going to be the meat and potatoes of why Irv Gotti serves as an example of why culturally and nationally black people, descendants of slaves, assuming he was an FBA, because I know he was half Filipino, and I just found that out today. I recorded this on the 7th of February, just to let you know, so day prior. I didn't know he was half Filipino, but I knew he couldn't be fully black based on his features, but that didn't matter. He was part of the culture. So here's my anecdotal story. I had a very close relative, I'm not going to say who, that lives in rural nowhere, Alabama. So, to give you context, on the road that this person lived, cars don't pass by too often. Literally got neighbors, but they're hardly around, and out in the middle of nowhere. This person ate on a bad diet and also loves to constantly work, still working up in age. Between a bad diet and the constant hustle, one day this person was so tired, this is a true story, that they passed out in the middle of in the field out where they were working, in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, where normally there are no eyewitnesses, so something could have happened because they passed out. But God is good, because on this day, just as that person was fainting, a car passed by and immediately and looked in their direction and immediately knew something was wrong and flew in that person's direction and immediately called an ambulance. It's like God brought that car in that direction at the right time, because I grew up visiting that area. Something simple as a venomous snake or poisonous snake biting you could be an emergency. And this is when cell phones in the 90s were not prevalent, from when I remember. But this happened to this person right before or during the pandemic. Next thing you know, they're in the ambulance. They go see doctor, test or run. Doctor comes in the room, sits by this relative and says, if you don't make changes, the next time you come see me, I'm cutting that leg off. This doctor is very direct. To this day, that person has made some drastic changes to their diet and to their lifestyle. Not lifestyle as far as the dieting, but they can still work on the hustle culture. My opinion. This person comes from a long line of my family members that were warned, you have got to watch your diet or I'm going to cut off some limbs. I've had family pass away in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years who were given that warning and didn't care. They still ate their big plate of chitlins. They still had their smothered pork chops and gravy. They still shunned water. I had a person I worked with years ago, when I asked him overweight, why don't you like water? Water is nasty. And I jumped down his butt. How do you live without water? But that's another story for another day. This person, looking at the long line of other family members, learn their lesson and drastically cut back on things they grew up eating. What does any of this have to do with Irv Gotti? It has everything to do with him, and he has everything to do with representing what we don't deal with as a black community in this country, culturally and nationally. This video right now, I'm going to give a tribute to Irv at the end, but before we get to the tribute, let's talk about the diet. I have to give Willie D Live a shout out because I know some people don't like him too much from the Ghetto Boys. He said something about not being able to turn back, and I want to touch on that because we're going to talk about 2 points, and first is the diet. What I took from Willie D Live, and I know he may not agree, can we quit selling the lie that it's never too late to blah, blah, blah? I put ellipsis behind that. Oh, it's never too late to blah, blah, blah. See, this culture lies to you. Not only your internal culture, the microcosm, which I'm going to call the black community, but the entire macrocosm lives a modern lie with all of these life coaches and stuff. You can always get it together. It's never too late to do such and such. If you don't like honesty, my channel's not the best for you. Some habits you have had for so long. We're not going to talk about the stuff that's not preventative. You can go out here and get hit by a car and be unalived. You can go get hit by a car and be maimed. You can be sitting in an upscale restaurant, excuse me, y'all, or be in the wrong place at the wrong time and something terrible happens to you. And that's a myriad of things. It's the preventatives and the preventables that get on my nerves. When a doctor or doctors have told you for years, because the relatives that came before the relative I said that passed out in the field, some were given a decade or more time to change and still refused to. And when you have diabetes and you know that, 10 years is a while to get yourself together. Yet still wanted to stuff their intestines with homemade macaroni and cheese. Still wanted that Nana pudding. The reason when I bring up Willie D from his Willie D Live is because these people put this messaging out and you all buy it hook, line, and sinker that you have all the time in the world to do what you want to do and need to do. Some stuff you get so past the point that you will never be able to reverse it. And by the time you do, the amount of time you wasted instead of fixing it when you were told to, you can't do anything about it. Because I can imagine the way that he went is suffering, and that he went to the afterlife knowing that the decisions he made, which not taking the preventables and the preventatives, is the reason that he went. Irv was not just a man of pop culture, counterculture, and whatever other categories you want to put him in, because I didn't really know much about him, but only saw a few clips from interviews. He still made the same bad choice we always make. Is that there was somewhat of a lack of self-control. And from what I read, he was changing it, but he had probably lived the bad stuff for so long that he could not reverse it. Based on what my understanding, he really wanted to reverse it. But you can only ignore certain things for so long. Listen at what I'm telling y'all. Hear the words coming out of my mouth. From the moment you all came out of your mother's womb, breathing, screaming, maybe some of you didn't cry when you were born. The day you were born on borrowed time. Life is not fair. If it was, newborn babies wouldn't pass away from sudden infant death syndrome. They wouldn't pass away a day after their birth. Children wouldn't be harmed by people of whom they think had their back. The day you're born with the breath in your body, you are on borrowed time. Why not stop this insanity of adding to that borrowed time by eating stuff that you know is not good for you? I'm not saying completely cut it out, but let's be honest, we are a community of people who were notorious for making fun for years of black vegans. Oh, you can't be black and be that, and don't lie, because we know that that's the conversation that was had. I necessarily am never going to fully give up meat, but the point about it is we could use a little more steamed vegetables in our diet. You can live and live a happy life, but sometimes happiness has a price. And that price is going to mean that something that tastes good is not good for you, and you may have to give it up entirely or give it up as a treat once, twice, maybe 3, 4 times a year. I've brought this up several times, and I'm going to keep beating this dead horse also. See, black people in this country, particularly descendants of slaves, you understand your history. You know the history of why you eat the stuff you eat. There are even people got whole YouTube channels dedicated to black food and the origin of it, who wrote whole books about it. And knowing that it was made to harm you, you'll still sit there and stuff yourself with it. And knowing that the doctor came back with this battery of tests to show you that you're not in good shape, you'll still do this to yourself. You don't have true intimacy with poison that you are deliberately ingesting. And look, we all eat stuff we don't have any business. And I do understand, being that I was born and raised in Alabama, Tuskegee, that while we eat those comfort foods and we listen to those doctors, it's noise, because can you trust the doctor? As a foundational black American, and don't act like that doesn't happen, a small tinge of this may be, oh, the doctor ain't talking to me. Oh. No, a small tinge of that is trust based on experiments that were run on us. Because when they stick you with that needle, you don't really know what's in there. You just trust that they're doing the right thing. And that's what scares you, and I understand, but you have to fight past that fear. And sometimes to fight that fear, you're going to have to give up a lot of things and eat right. I'm not somebody who's trying to talk self-righteous. I'm telling you as a person that's got at least 30 pounds to lose. And I'm a person who hasn't had soul food in a long time. Outside of fried chicken, I don't even eat the rest of it. Banana pudding was my favorite dessert growing up. The last time I had it was 2018, and before that 2016, and before that 1998. If somebody had told me that I was going to give up banana pudding, it was inconceivable. So this is another lesson before I move to the second point that Willie D taught me. My grandma was an excellent cook, and she passed away of dementia type disease, as well as possibly complications from diabetes, and they think her cancer had come back. And we know where the diabetes came from. My grandma sometimes ate really bad. She did it in moderation and didn't pack her plate, but she didn't eat so well all the time. She used to dance around the subject of giving us her recipes, especially her chicken and dressing. I miss it. And her buttermilk pies. I was angry at her for years. Because people are like, I don't think she knows the recipe. She's a natural cook. That's a lie, because you got to know how to properly measure, especially making pies. You put too many eggs, not enough eggs, you bake it for too little or bake it for too long. That can make or break a pie. Then I remember a conversation that we had where she wanted me to break down the different kinds of salmon out here in the Pacific Northwest where I live in Washington State. Chinook, coho, and sockeye. And it wasn't until she passed away that I put two and two together that this wasn't a lighthearted conversation. Because she suffered in those last years. She wanted that to go to the grave with her as a subliminal signal that it was time for all of us to forge a new identity and change. It's with sadness that Irv learned that too late. My heartfelt sympathies go out towards his family. Now let's get to the second thing he said that bothered me just as much as the way he passed. Nationally, it's been harder on black men than any other demographic, and that's going to be very controversial for a lot of you all to hear. Because black men, to a degree, have always been threatening to this society. And what happens is although Irv had Filipino heritage, this country judged you based on outer appearance. And when you looked at him, what you saw was a black man. So not only did he have to hustle to take care of his family, as stated in the interviews, and we're going to talk about that. That hustle is even more so for black men. Look, it's good to be a hard worker. A person would much rather have a hard worker than a lazy worker. But when you combine a constant hustle culture with a bad diet, the two things are going to collide and have a cost that to me is not worth it. So then that begs the question for all of you who've decided to listen. United States is not a perfect country. We know this. But there is no direct link to a caste system, meaning we know there's a caste. There's the haves and have-nots, but it's not as pronounced in, say, England with peerage systems or caste systems in, say, India. So you can really have nothing and build yourself to something, like Eddie Brown, like the late Reginald Lewis, who bought out McCall's. I want y'all to really think hard about what I'm going to say, because as a person who was eating on a bad diet and up to recently was also a workaholic, January of this year was my ending point that pushed me. How far are we willing to push ourselves for hustle culture and the need to have things? Because in interviews and clips of interviews I'd heard with Irv when he was still alive for many years, he prided himself on constantly being a hard worker. And from what I took from it, he was a hustler. Look, this isn't a video where I'm knocking a man for taking care of his family. Excuse my burp, y'all. Because Irv seemed to have taken pride in being a breadwinner. But what are the limitations to that? And how much of life are you willing to not life and give up? To hustle, to have things. Just so like we don't like people who are overly lazy, your family can also get listless and restless when you want to work all of the time. I believe that Irv's greatest mistakes is that he loved the hustle culture and he combined it with a bad diet. It gets easy to do these things because you want that comfort food at the end of the day when you've worked 60 to 80-hour weeks. You don't want no fuss, you don't want no drama, you just want that comfort. I believe the combination of the two things is what caused his untimely demise. At the age that that man went, he's under 70. He was still young. I don't question God's motives. I quit doing that long time ago. God could take me out of here in the next hour. You just don't know. But between a bad diet and wanting to constantly work and not take a breather, which I'm not saying that's what Irv has done. It's just some of his interviews lend to the fact that that's what he was. And I get it, in the industry he was in. You're not working 8-hour days. Not when you're pushing albums out like that and doing promotions. The sad thing is there are some people now who are willing to pay the same price he did and do not count the cost. And they won't count the cost until it's too late. And what do we do about that? Or better yet, what do they do for themselves? I can sit here and tell you money isn't everything. That's also a lie. I don't gaslight on this channel. Money isn't everything, but you sure as heck need it to live in this economy. When chickens are being unalived because they may have a virus that can harm and jump into humans. Egg prices are up. And look, I'm going to tell y'all something. When inflation goes down, those prices aren't going down. We're going to now go into our tribute to Irv. I just think he is a representation of what happens when you juxtapose a constant work schedule with not so good eating habits. This resonated with me, and his passing resonated with me as a person who found out only in 2022 on my maternal side and 2023 on my paternal side that diabetes runs in my family. I was eating junk. I was stuffing my face, having working lunches, and not taking care of myself because I needed to prove myself. And as a person who is a foundational Black American, I thought I had to do that. The start of the new year, shortly before I turned 45, January 16th, I reached my breaking point. And when he passed, it scared me because I realized, had I not pumped the brakes and realized that putting up the act of hard work doesn't mean it's going to get recognized and that people see it that way. And stuffing my face with bad food just to get some calories in me to stay awake is unhealthy. This isn't easy for me to confess. And I know if you all come and say you're making this about you, you're right. It sounds that way. But he's a representation culturally of our need to still stuff our face with not fast food, not just fast food, because we live in food jungles, but also soul food. He's also a representation of our constant hustling. And I get it, when you own a business, you need that. But it's time to tighten our belts and slow down. It's time to say that it's okay to take a vacation, that it's okay not to work yourself to death, because most people don't care. If you pass out and go today, somebody gonna replace you tomorrow. Before the sun sets, they're thinking about your replacement if they haven't found it already. Is that messed up? Yeah, but this is human nature. Life has to soldier on. Pump the brakes, slow down, and do better. Gonna play a quick mini tribute. If you don't take anything from my videos in 2025, please heed my warning. Things have to change. They just have to change.